the oldest texts of humanity agree on something that modern science does not know how to explain. Civilizations separated by oceans and millennia, with no possible contact, describe the same lost world. A world where humans lived for 900 years and 4-meter giants walked among them. A world so corrupted at its roots that the only possible solution was to erase it completely from history. More than 200 cultures across all continents keep alive the memory of that same global cataclysm. What really happened in the centuries leading up to the greatest flood the world has ever seen? What you are about to hear is not a legend, it is recorded in the oldest known texts. And what those texts reveal should forever change the way you understand the origin of the world. Open Genesis in its early chapters, and you are not just looking at another time, but a different planet. There was no blue sky as you know it today, nor rain, nor storms, nor any kind of violent weather. Genesis chapter 2 accurately describes that God had not yet sent any rain upon the earth. Instead, a warm and dense mist continuously rose from the ground and covered the entire surface. Scholars believe that a layer of water vapor surrounded the entire atmosphere of the ancient planet. That layer trapped heat, filtered radiation, and kept the earth at a constant and uniform warmth. The trees were so colossal that their trunks exceeded the width of any human construction. The ferns rose several meters above the head, and the vegetation formed living walls of greenery. The air was saturated with oxygen, and each breath filled the lungs with an unknown depth. The entire planet was a vibrant and lush garden, and at the center of that garden was Eden. The scriptures say that it was watered by a river that divided into 4 branches: Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates. In the heart of Eden stood 2 trees that would define the fate of all humankind: the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, separated by divine will. In that garden, Adam walked with God, not in prayer, not in ritual, but literally by his side. And then everything broke. A single act of disobedience before the forbidden tree changed absolutely everything. In an instant, the entire structure of creation was torn apart from its deepest foundations. God cursed the very ground that once produced freely and effortlessly. Now it would yield thorns and thistles. And for the first time since creation, humanity would have to earn its bread with sweat and exhausting work. And for the first time in the history of the known universe, death entered the world of the living. Adam and Eve were expelled, but here is a detail that almost no one mentions when telling this story. The Eden did not disappear. Genesis chapter 3 says that God placed cherubim with flaming swords. The garden continued to exist somewhere in the antediluvian world, visible but absolutely unreachable. A wall of fire and angelic guardians surrounded paradise as a permanent reminder of what was lost. Adam and Eve left paradise, but they did not leave alone. They carried with them the burden of knowing what they had lost. And the first generation born outside those doors would demonstrate how quickly humanity can fall. Adam and Eve had 2 sons. Cain, the firstborn, worked the land, and Abel, the younger, took care of flocks. Both brought offerings to God, but Abel offered the best of his flock, and Cain only some of the harvest. The scripture does not say it was the best of Cain, only that it was something, and God accepted Abel's offering. Cain was filled with fury, and God, in one of the most intimate moments of all scripture, went to speak with him. Genesis 4-7. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted. But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. Cain ignored every word. He took his brother to the field, and under the open sky of the young world, he killed him. When God asked where Abel was, Cain gave the most chilling answer in all of Scripture. "Am I my brother's keeper?" Cain replied coldly, and was cursed, cast out to the east. However, Cain did not wander for long. He built a city, the first in human history. He named it Enoch, in honor of his son, and from his lineage, an entire civilization exploded with astonishing speed. Jubal became the father of those who raised livestock. Jubal invented music, the harp, and the flute. Tubal-Cain dominated the forging of bronze and iron, becoming the first metallurgist in history. In just a few generations, humanity had invented livestock farming, music, and metalworking. Civilization was advancing at an impressive speed, but it was advancing without God and on the foundations of the first crime. And the violence not only continued, it became a badge of honor within the lineage of Cain. Lamech, a direct descendant of Cain, stood before his two wives and recited the first poem in history. Lamech declared that he had killed a young man merely for wounding him. If Cain would be avenged 7 times, then Lamech 77 times. No eye for an eye, your life for a scratch. And he boasted about it to everyone, without any visible remorse. While the lineage of Cain built its stone empires, there existed another line that was quieter and forgotten. After the death of Abel, Adam and Eve had another son named Seth, and the world began to change. Genesis 4 says something extraordinary for its time. Then men began to call on the name of the Lord. While the descendants of Cain forged weapons and built cities, those of Seth built something different. Genesis chapter 5 contains the most extraordinary family tree in all of recorded history. Adam lived 930 years. Seth lived 912. Enosh reached 905. And Canaan lived a full 910 years. Jared lived 962 years. These were not short and brutal lives, cut short by disease and time. They were men who witnessed entire civilizations rise and fall within a single, uninterrupted lifetime. A man could master all the skills known to humanity and still have centuries ahead. If you do the calculations from Genesis chapter 5, Adam was still alive when Lamech, the father of Noah, was born. The first man to ever walk on earth coincided in time with the grandfather of the builder of the Ark. Adam could have told Lamech firsthand what the Garden of Eden was like, how the voice of God sounded, without a damaged phone, without a broken tradition, direct testimony, face to face, spanning almost 2,000 years of history. In that genealogy, there are 2 men who stand out from all the others for completely different reasons. The first is Enoch. Genesis 5:24 contains one of the most extraordinary phrases in all of written scripture. Enoch walked faithfully with God, and then he disappeared because God took him away with him forever. One of only 2 people in all of Scripture who ever experienced death, as we know it. The Book of Enoch claims that God showed him visions of the coming judgment, and then took him away before it arrived. The second man who stands out is Methuselah, the longest-lived human being who has ever existed. He lived 969 years, but it is his name in Hebrew that should stop you in your tracks when you understand it well. Now do the calculation. Add the ages from Genesis 5, calculate when he was born, and when exactly he died. Methuselah died in the exact year of the flood. His entire life, the full 969 years, was a countdown. A living prophecy, a warning that breathed with each day that Methuselah lived, was one more day of mercy. And on the day he died, the waters fell upon the earth without any delay and without any further warning. For almost 1,000 years, Methuselah walked the earth like a living clock, counting down the days to judgment. But during those centuries, something began to happen that would push the world beyond the point of no return. Something so disturbing that the Bible describes it in the most mysterious passage of the entire book of Genesis. And it began with lights descending from the sky in the darkness of the night, slow, deliberate, and unsettling. Imagine being on the edge of a dark forest at midnight, when the air becomes completely still. You look up, and there are lights in the sky, but they don't fall like meteors. They descend slowly, with intention. Genesis chapter 6 opens with words that have been debated for thousands of years without a definitive consensus. When humans began to multiply on the earth, the sons of God saw the daughters of men. They saw that they were beautiful and took as wives anyone they chose, without any restriction of any kind. Scholars have debated for centuries who those sons of God were. Fallen angels? Powerful kings? The oldest interpretation, supported by Job, Jude, 2 Peter, and the Book of Enoch, calls them angels. Celestial beings who abandoned their domain and crossed a boundary that should never have been crossed by anyone. The Book of Enoch calls them the Watchers and says they descended in plain sight, without hiding, without subtlety. Ancient texts describe them as huge figures between 2.5 and 3 meters tall, imposing in stature. Her skin emitted a faint glow. Her eyes burned in the darkness and knew every name, every secret. When they emerged from the fog, they already knew your name, and they arrived bringing gifts that no one had asked for. Seeds that grew faster, techniques for forging metals that no human mind had ever conceived before. Knowledge of the stars, of medicine, of the hidden properties of unknown minerals and plants. Azazel taught the art of war and the art of vanity. Semyaza taught sorcery and dark enchantments. Barakiel taught astrology, systematically diverting humanity's eyes from the Creator to the creation. It was a surge of knowledge that would have taken generations to develop, delivered all at once without preparation. But that knowledge came at a terrible price. They desired women and united with them. Genesis states plainly that they took for themselves wives from among all the daughters of men, choosing whoever they wished. This was not a courtship. Families watched helplessly as their daughters were taken by beings they could not resist. The children born from those unions were not normal, and what Scripture describes challenges every known category. Genesis 6-4, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, the heroes of old, men of renown. The Hebrew phrase is Anshe Hashem, men of the name, but they were not ordinary heroes in any sense of the word. Ancient texts describe their growth as rapid and unnatural. By the age of 2, they had the strength of an adult. At 10 years old, they exceeded 3 meters. In full maturity, they reached 4 meters or more in impressive height. A force that defied everything the natural world had produced before or after that dark moment. But the most terrifying thing about the Nephilim was not their gigantic body. It was their cold mind, with no empathy whatsoever. They learned at an extraordinary speed, mastering complex ideas, but viewed humans as resources. When those hybrids reached maturity, they decided that they no longer wanted to be children, but absolute kings. They demanded tribute, built palaces, and erected statues of themselves in the squares of every major city. The hierarchy was simple, they at the top and humans at the base of a pyramid built on terror. But there was a growing problem that no one could ignore. How do you feed an entire population of giants? First, they consumed the crops, then the flocks, and then the wild animals of the forests and plains. And when that was exhausted, they turned to the only source of food that remained available, without any possible resistance. Ancient Jewish traditions described them developing an appetite for human flesh as a public ritual. Think of the Greek legends of the Titans devouring their own children. We see them as creative fantasy. But what if they are traumatic memories of something that really happened and that became ingrained in the collective mind? Goliath, centuries later, at nearly 3 meters, was just a genetic echo of what those beings were at their peak. The Nephilim turned the world into a slaughterhouse. But they were not the only ones responsible for what was to come. Something was happening in the very creation, in the DNA of life, that made destruction inevitable. The Antediluvian world was not a single civilization. It was 2 completely separate and opposing worlds. On one side, the descendants of Cain have high stone walls, bronze doors, and forges hammering incessantly. Music resonating in the squares, active commerce, ritual worship of giants, luxury and terror intertwined. Technologically advanced, spiritually dead, building a bright world on a rotten foundation. On the other side, in the mountains, the lineage of Seth has leather tents, without walls, without an army, without cities. Only the oral tradition that came from Adam about the garden and a promise that a rescue would come from above. For generations, that separation kept the pious line pure, away from the corruption that was growing below. Then the barrier broke. The men of the lineage of Seth looked down and saw the shining cities. They saw painted eyes, luxury, powerful music, power, and pleasure that they had never known in the cold mountains. One by one they descended the mountain. Seduction triumphed over holiness, and the lineages began to mix. And when the last barrier fell, corruption spread to every remaining corner of the entire human race. The flood did not come because some people were bad. It came because even the good had been corrupted. But while human morality was collapsing, something even more grotesque was happening in the forests and fields of the ancient world. Genesis 6:12 uses a phrase that most read too quickly without stopping to understand its true weight. All flesh had corrupted its way upon the earth. The Hebrew is kol basar, which means all biological matter. God had established a law in Genesis that each creature would reproduce according to its kind, and only that. There was a boundary written in the genetic code of every living being, and that boundary was deliberately violated. The Book of Jasher and the Book of Jubilees speak of the mixing of seeds between incompatible species. Think of all the ancient mythology: centaurs, minotaurs, chimeras, sphinxes, creatures that are half human, half animal. Carved in the temples of civilizations that had no contact with each other throughout the known world. We see them as creative fantasy. But what if we are looking at forensic sketches of something that really walked? The genetic code of life was contaminated beyond any possible repair, and nature reflected it. Unstable creatures, predators that the ecosystem could not sustain, animals caught between incompatible natures. This changes the way you understand the flood. Most read it as an explosion of blind divine wrath. But the entire biology of life was so corrupted that the original creation was already unrecognizable to its creator. It was not anger, it was cosmic chemotherapy. The only way to save the original was to eliminate the infected cells. Every living being was condemned, every man, every woman, every child, every creature that walked, swam, or flew. It was all over until God looked down and saw a single man who still bore the uncorrupted image. Genesis 6-5 contains the most devastating phrase in all of recorded ancient history in any known text. The Lord saw that every inclination of the human heart was only evil, continually, without any possible exception. No sometimes, not frequently, always. The Hebrew word is hamas, fanatic cruelty and total contempt for life. And then comes verse 6, which most people read hurriedly without stopping to feel its true weight. The Lord regretted having created humankind on earth, and his heart was filled with deep and immense sorrow. The one who sculpted every mountain and filled every ocean. The one who knelt in the dust and breathed his own breath into the first man. That God looked at the twisted nightmare that humanity had become, and his heart broke with sorrow. Not out of fury, but out of sorrow, the deepest pain that the universe had known since the beginning of time. I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race that I created, along with the animals, the birds, and the creatures of the ground. Everything was ready for destruction. And then comes one of the most powerful words in all of Scripture. Genesis 6-8. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. One single word, one single man. The pivot of history. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God when no one else did on the earth. The word integral in Hebrew is tamim, complete, whole, not contaminated by the corruption that surrounded it everywhere. Noah was not only morally righteous, his genetic lineage was untainted by the corruption of the Nephilim. His bloodline still carried the original image of God, intact, while the rest of the world was crumbling. It was the clean sample, the last intact thread that connected humanity with what God had created in the beginning. God gave him a task that would have destroyed any other man, to build a ship in a world without rain. The specifications were exact. 300 cubits long, about 137 meters, 50 wide, and 30 high with 3 floors. Modern naval architects have confirmed that those proportions are optimal for a ship designed to survive. The Ark was the size of a modern cargo ship, and Noah built it with pre-industrial tools over decades. Imagine the scene. An elderly man, hundreds of years old, builds a huge wooden structure on completely dry sand. He says that water will fall from the sky. Water has never fallen from the sky in the entire known history of the world. He says the world will be destroyed. He says it every day, for decades, while everyone ignores him with total indifference. The second epistle of Peter calls him a preacher of righteousness. He was not only building, he was warning. No one listened. Jesus himself described it in Matthew 24 with words that should shake anyone who hears them. They ate, drank, married, and were given in marriage until the day Noah entered the ark, and no one believed it. And they knew nothing until the flood came and took them all away. Out of all the human population, 8 believed. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. 8 people from an entire civilization that had existed for centuries. Then the animals came, not captured or driven by force. God sent them from all directions, 2 of each species. 7 pairs of clean animals converging from every corner of the world towards the ark. 7 days, the last week of the ancient world. Noah entered, the animals entered, and then came the most terrifying verse. Genesis 7:16, and the Lord shut the door behind him. God himself closed the door from the outside with his own hand. When God closes a door, no one opens it. For 7 days they were inside in complete silence and darkness. Meanwhile, outside the world continued. People ate, drank, and laughed without knowing that grace had come to an end. And then, for the first time in the history of the world, it rained. It was not just rain from the darkened sky. Genesis 7:11, all the springs of the great abyss burst forth, and the floodgates of the heavens were opened together. The earth itself split apart. Underground reservoirs under unimaginable pressure broke through the crust. The tectonic plates cracked. Giant geysers of superheated water erupted from below with brutal force. And at the same time, the sky above collapsed. The vapor canopy failed. For the first time in history, there was thunder. A sound that no human ear had ever heard filled the air just before the first drops began to fall. People who had lived their entire lives in a warm and storm-free world saw the sky tear apart. Water from above, water from below. The rivers overflowed in minutes. The valleys disappeared in the first hour. Walled cities became deadly traps. The walls that excluded enemies now contained water. The stone palaces, the bronze doors, and all the technology of the Watchers turned out to be completely useless. All useless. The 4-meter-tall Nephilim were standing with water up to their chests with nowhere to go. The most advanced civilization in history was sinking into the mud while a wooden box began to rise. Everything that humanity had built without God, God undid in exactly 40 days and 40 nights. 40 days, 40 nights, then silence, the deepest silence the earth had ever known. 1,600 years of human history drowned under meters of cold, dark water, completely erased. Genesis chapter 8. But God remembered Noah. After more than a year on the water, the ark came to rest on Ararat. Noah sent out a raven, then a dove. The dove returned with an olive branch, the first green promise of new life. The first thing Noah did when he came down from the ark was not to celebrate, plant a flag, or claim any territory. Genesis 8:20, Noah built an altar to the Lord and offered burnt offerings on it, not triumph, but pure gratitude. That is the kind of man that God chose to restart the human race from scratch with a real second chance. The world had changed forever. The vapor canopy had vanished, and radiation now arrived unfiltered. Lifespans dramatically shortened. Noah lived 950 years, his son Shem 600, Arphaxad 438, and Peleg only 239 years. The decline is not gradual, it is a cliff. The seasons now existed with extreme temperatures, deserts, and ice. God placed a rainbow in the sky and spoke the words of Genesis 9, "Never again will the waters destroy all life." The same words from Eden resonated over the devastated land. A second beginning, the same blessing, a new opportunity. The story of a great flood is not only in the Bible. The Sumerians recorded it with Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Hindu tradition preserves the story of Manu. Chinese mythology speaks of Gunyu. The Greeks had Deucalion. Indigenous peoples from each continent have their own flood narratives without any contact between them. There are more than 200 stories of a great flood in cultures that never knew or shared anything. More than 200 civilizations separated by oceans and millennia remember the same event with the same elements. How can that be explained from any rational perspective, without considering that something of that magnitude really happened? And none of it saved them, because everything they built completely without God as a foundation. A man heard the warning. A family chose to believe. And thanks to those 8 people, each one of us exists. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Normality as the final deadly trap. People who had every warning, every sign, every possible opportunity, and chose to continue eating and drinking. The antediluvian world is not ancient history. According to Jesus, it is a mirror that looks directly into our eyes today. And the question she asks is the same one that was asked in the days of Noah. Will you heed the warning before the door closes? If this story opens something inside you, there are many more mysteries like this waiting to be discovered together. Subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. The Tower of Babel, the fallen angels, and the secrets that the world forgot.